This is the second video lecture for section 3.8 on more modular arithmetic and public key cryptography. In this lecture, I'll be giving you a brief discussion of public key systems. Last time we talked about ciphers that use multiplication in modular arithmetic as the encryption method. And what we saw is that when this operation is reversible, and it's not always reversible, but when it is, we can do it by doing another multiplication operation. But in general, it's difficult to find that second reverse multiplication operation, especially if the numbers happen to be very large. So this is an example of what we call an asymmetric cipher. So asymmetric here just means not symmetric. So the encryption method and decryption method are a little bit different. In the methods that we talked about before, we could pretty easily figure out how to decrypt our message just from knowing how to encrypt the message. But in these multiplicative ciphers and other ciphers like them, even if we know the number that we use to encrypt our message, it's hard to figure out the number that we should use to decrypt our message. And this allows for a system called public key cryptography. So in public key cryptography, every person has a personal method for encrypting and decrypting messages. Think of it as every person's social security number or password, right? So a personal encryption code. And with a multiplicative cipher, the keys are numbers. The encryption key is the number that you multiply to encrypt the message, and the decryption key is the number that you use to decrypt the message. And the weird thing with public key cryptography is we actually make everyone's encryption key public. So everyone knows everyone's encryption number, but the decryption numbers are kept secret. And we can do this with an asymmetric cipher because it's hard to figure out, and we're going to talk a little later about exactly how hard, but it's hard to figure out what that decryption key would be for any particular person. So anybody can encrypt a message using your key because those keys are public, but only you can decrypt that message because only you know the reverse, only you know the decryption key. And this allows us to have some interesting security features. So let's suppose that Alana wants to send a message to Beth, and Alana encrypts their message using Beth's public key. So anybody could have done that, but Alana did it. So Alana has a message that they want to send, they use Beth's public key to encrypt it, and then they send it to Beth. Only Beth is going to be able to decrypt this message and read it because only Beth knows Beth's decryption key. So Alana doesn't have to worry about their message being intercepted. So this transmission problems where we worry about the message being intercepted by somebody else and somebody else reading it, we don't have to worry about that here because only Beth is going to be able to decrypt this message. Imagine it this way. Using Beth's public key to encrypt a message is like putting it in a special box that only Beth can open. Now, anybody can buy Beth boxes, but only Beth can open them. So for example, let's say Beth's boxes are blue, only Beth can open blue boxes. Or you might imagine that these boxes come with a special lock and only Beth has the key to those locks. But different boxes for different people. So Alana's boxes, again, anybody can buy Alana boxes, but Alana's boxes are a different color, for example, red. Anyone can buy red Alana boxes, but only Alana can open them. So if Beth wants to respond to Alana's message, they encrypt their message using Alana's public key. So Beth receives a message in a blue Beth box. Only Beth can open that box. Beth reads the message, says, okay, I've got a response now. So Beth buys a red Alana box, Beth puts their message into that red box and send it back to Alana. So in this way, Beth and Alana can communicate back and forth and not have to worry about anybody else reading their messages. There's something else that we can do with this kind of system. We can also sign messages using a public key system. So imagine this scenario. Let's suppose Christine works at a bank and receives a request to transfer a large amount of money out of Beth's bank account. Christine wants Beth to send a secure message verifying the transfer, right? Because, hey, this is a large amount of money. I want to make sure that this request is really coming from Beth. So Beth could send a message, something like, I authorize the money transfer, using Christine's public key. So in this example, let's assume Christine boxes are yellow. So Beth puts this authorization message into a Christine box. Only Christine will be able to read that message. So Christine could open this box and it says, oh yeah, this is definitely a message from Beth. I definitely authorize this transfer. But how would Christine know that that message truly came from Beth? Well, the key here is that everyone knows Christine's public key. So anyone could have sent this message to Christine. So what's something that only Beth could have done? Well, only Beth knows Beth's private key. But remember, these keys are just numbers that we multiply by. So we could multiply by Beth's private key to encrypt this message. Then, using Beth's public key, again, we're just multiplying by two numbers, so the order that we multiply them doesn't matter. So Christine could multiply the message that Christine receives using Beth's public key, which everybody knows, including Christine, and then that message would be decrypted. And it would only be decrypted using Beth's public key if it had come from Beth and been encrypted with Beth's private key. So this is a way that we can verify who actually sent the message, not just where the message was sent to. So in the real world, we would notice that the affine and multiplicative ciphers that we talked about in the previous lecture are substitution ciphers. And that means that they're actually not that secure, right? Even if we didn't have the decryption key, we could use frequency analysis, as we talked about, to crack these codes. So they're not really suitable for real-world public key cryptography, but in the real world, what we do is we sort of modify these methods and make them have more steps. But the basic idea that we're talking about is really there, right? So they really are based on, at some level, multiplying by a number, and then to decrypt your message, multiplying by another number. So at the base level, that really is the basic concept. For example, one of the systems that's used in commonly today is called RSA Cryptography. And the letters there, RSA, stand for three people's last names. And that relies on, again, the same kind of ideas that we've studied: prime numbers, inverse operations, modular arithmetic. But the prime numbers that are used for RSA are many, many digits long. A modern web browser uses keys that are represented by 256 binary digits, also called bits. We've talked about binary numbers and codes. It's just zeros and ones, so a sequence of 256 zeros and ones. But that means that the number that sequence of zeros and ones represents could actually be as large as 2 to the 256th power. So that just means 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, 256 times. That's a gigantic number. That's a 78-digit long number. And so finding multiplicative inverses with numbers that large is really impractical. And that impracticability is what helps guarantee the security of this system. Just to give you an example, let's say we know someone's public key. We know Beth's public key, and we want to try to figure out Beth's private key just by using guess and check. Well, even if we had a computer that checked 1 trillion keys per second, right? Checks another number, multiplies it by the public key, and sees if that cancels it out, sees if that gets us back to the original message. It would take 3 billion trillion years to check all of the possible keys. So unless our computer is really good at guessing, it's very unlikely that some kind of trial and error method would help us figure out how to decrypt this message. So to wrap things up, data and communication are everywhere in our everyday lives. There's lots of mathematical ideas that we've studied in this unit that govern the way that these systems work. And new mathematical ideas are being developed all the time to create and manage developing technology in our changing world.